Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Developing a Port Community System and Electronic Single Window to Improve Trade and Business Facilitation in Barbados. My name is Andrea Power. I am the coordinator for Regional Cooperation and Integration with the Caribbean Development Bank, and I will be your moderator for the session this morning. I'd like to, first of all, say a special good morning and establish protocol to Ms. Sonia Foster, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, Mr. Owen Holder, our Controller of Customs here in Barbados, and of course, our Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Port Incorporated, Mr. David Jean-Marie. We also have a lineup this morning of very distinguished panelists who will be more thoroughly introduced later on in the program. But just for a quick review, we have Mr. Hans Rook, Chairman of the International Port Community System Association. We have Mr. Richard Morton, who is the General Secretary of the International Port Community System Association. We have Mr. Warsama Gire, I hope I got that right, the CEO of the Jabilty Port Community System, and of course, Mr. Dwayne Powell, Director of the Port Community System Operator, Jamaica Port Authority. Without further ado, I will just, a few housekeeping issues. One is that because of the numbers, I did post this in the chat, but because of the numbers that we have on the call, we will use the chat forum to receive your questions, and I will convey those to the panel and to everyone so that they can be answered. Where we have questions that are similar in nature, to avoid duplication and maximize the use of the time for the question exchange, we will consolidate those for more general responses. With that said, I'd like to invite Permanent Secretary Foster to deliver her opening remarks. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Andrea. And protocol haven't been established. I'll just get right into it. Actually, these are the minister's remarks, and I apologize on his behalf. He has cabinet meeting this morning, and he's unable to make it. But thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you all for bringing this together. This is a very important aspect of the port's work, and I just want to thank you for making this webinar possible. So I'll go directly into the minister's remarks. Seaports globally are undergoing a transformation from goods handling centers to interconnected goods information handling hubs within the global logistics chain. In an industry where cost pressures, increased regulation, and stricter environmental standards are manifesting more than ever before, the incentives for ports to exploit digital technologies and connected devices have never been stronger. New technologies are rapidly changing the logistics landscape, hence requesting all transport, logistics, and supply chain actors to be more innovative and agile. The onset of COVID-19 pandemic has not only disrupted trade globally, but has further accelerated the pace of change at seaports, catalyzing a more proactive approach to harnessing the powers of digitalization and smart technology. There is a clear need for a stronger focus on data sharing activities within a port setting. This is being driven by demands for optimal port operations through real-time navigation and automation. The Port of Bridgetown has been responding to the demand for change, re-engineering key aspects of its operations through technology, and its initiatives previously planned for implementation over the long term have been executed in short order to keep cargo flows moving. As a result, the Barbados Port Inc. is now boasting an e-payment platform, an online cargo tracking facility, an electronic appointment system for cargo collection, and enhanced border security screening protocols with expanded and improved CCTV coverage. Significant work continues in enhancing documentary and process improvements at the port. This brings into focus our work on the development of a port community system. The work schedule is on track, encompassing modules already developed, such as the Maritime Single Window. A port community system, or PCS, is a neutral and open electronic platform, enabling intelligent and secure information exchange between public and private stakeholders in order to improve the competitive position of the seaport community. It optimizes, manages, and automates suggested efficient processes through a single submission of data, connecting transport and logistic chains. Why choose to have a port community system? Our goal in developing a PCS is to enable information and operational collaboration among all regulatory agencies and commercial entities operating within the port to expedite cargo and cruise throughput. The primary reason is to reduce inefficiencies in port business processes. The second is to facilitate the smooth flow of electronic data. Electronic facilitation of goods delivery through improved data exchange will mean fewer delays in cargo moves. Identification of the main dysfunctions and development opportunities within the logistics supply chain is crucial to differentiating Barbados and improving its trade across borders rankings. At the same time, the port must be in a position to offer its services efficiently and at competitive costs. The smart port of tomorrow that wants to integrate into the new supply chain dynamic will need an integrated and seamless technology base that will reduce total cost of the supply chain to optimal asset utilization. Additionally, it would lower inventory costs through efficient cargo management and visibility of the entire value chain. The alternative option is to continue with a sea of paper, associated inefficiencies, inaccuracies, and far too much duplication of work. We at the Port of Bridgetown aspire to be a smart port of tomorrow. Achieving this objective, however, demands a collaborative effort. We are sincerely appreciative of the continued support of the Caribbean Development Bank in our quest to establish a PCS. The CDB has been instrumental in getting the terms of reference and the results and monitoring framework for our PCS. We are grateful for the cooperation of the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, especially on its push for an electronic single window for trade and the Customs and Excise Department for the key role it has been playing in this endeavor. We are pleased to have won international support for the Barbados PCS, as evidenced by the presence of the International Port Community System Association, represented by both Chairman, Mr. Hans Rook, and Secretary General, Mr. Richard Morton, as well as representatives from Jabilty, CEO, Mr. Warsamagire, and Jamaica, Director Mr. Dwayne Powell. They have set the pace on implementation of port community systems, having recognized the need for a stronger focus on smart port development and better port-to-port integration and communication, where data and information sharing have become more common. We cannot ignore the rising tide of global digitalization and need to prepare for and invest now in our digital future. Port digitization is a long-term process which requires all port stakeholders alike to undergo continuous, structural, functional, and strategic transformation. This morning's webinar is intended to kickstart discussions on the digital challenge and driving the needed change at port organizational and port community level. For us here today, representatives of shipping lines, agents, freight forwarders, importers and exporters, Barbados Port Inc., customs, ministries, and other authorities within the port community. We must be prepared to agree and make bold moves to position Barbados' maritime sector for the future. Looking ahead to the near future, we have big plans that we are working toward every day. If we stay focused on that future and work together, we can chart a forward-looking course for many more years to come. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. I just wanted to advise that I am working remotely from home, so there may be a random young person moving up and down. So I do apologize upfront for the distractions, but such is the nature of the work environment in 2020. I'd like to invite now Mr. Owen Holder, our Controller of Customs, to deliver his remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all protocols established. Let me say thanks to the Barbados Port Inc. for inviting me to give my remarks for the opening for this webinar. I consider today as one of the major steps the Barbados Port Inc. will take in facilitating trade in our country. Customs, freight forwarders, shippers, inspection agencies, and other organizations need access to real-time information to effectuate timely and efficient operations, which can result in quick processing of imported goods. I believe the port community system is well placed to provide this information. The electronic platform is a spider's web of logistics intelligence, which are required for smooth, efficient trading. It relays messages and enables the use of data whenever required, so that the entry of data once in the system is now accessible by all stakeholders to facilitate easy and quick processing of goods. Furthermore, the system is capable of eliminating unnecessary paperwork which can clog up cargo handling. Its electronic data exchange capability can render an effective, real-time information system that is fast, focused, flexible, and multifaceted to achieve efficiency in processing manifest, vessel discharge and loading, customs clearance, port health and plant quarantine formalities, and the delivery of goods in and out of the port. As the Barbados Port Inc. sojourns through the process of implementing and operating the port community system, major decisions will have to be made regarding its operations. As you can imagine, my main focus will be on decisions surrounding customs operations. My experience of working with similar systems will lead me to ask a few questions, which must be answered regarding the operations of the system. How will the receipt of the cargo manifest operate? Will the manifest continue to be submitted to Executive World firstly, or will ship agents now be required to submit the manifest to the port community system initially? This question should not be taken lightly, given the legal implication of the process. You should note that these were major questions that had to be answered in some destinations as they sought to implement the port community system. Another major and important question to be answered or decision to be made is, will the port community system interface with Executive World? And if so, what will be the data components to be pushed or pulled by each system as they interface with each other? I am confident, however, that these are questions under consideration and will be easily answered at the appropriate time. Overall, the Customs Department gives full support to the initiative and stands ready to be a meaningful and supportive partner for the implementation of the system. This is necessary given the close and sometimes inseparable relationship required between the two agencies as we conduct our daily activities. I assure the CEO that I'm accessible to lend my expertise and experience where required, since I was previously closely associated with the implementation of Executive World and a port community system. I wish the Barbados Port Inc. well in this endeavor, and I'm confident that the initiative will augur well for the success of the organization, trade facilitation, and the country on a whole. Thank you very much, and do have a good day.
Thank you very much, Controller. I'd like to invite Mr. Hans Rock, Chairman of the International Port Community System Association, to deliver remarks.
Thank you, Andrea. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session, a very important session for the Port of Barbados and Barbados in total, I think. On behalf of the International Port Community System Association, it's a a real pleasure to be part of this important event focusing on port community systems and single window. It is disappointing that we cannot meet in person due to the ongoing impact of COVID-19, but hope that the situation allows us to visit Barbados in the coming months. I mentioned COVID-19, and we have seen an increasing reliance and awareness on digital systems in ports due to the ongoing pandemic. Too much paperwork that is handed over a number of times from person to person. The virus that is the virus can remain for 4 days on paper. War on paper has to intensify. Digitalization is key, not considering if you should automate the processes, but just when. A port community system is the ideal tool to share, exchange data, reducing the amount of paper documents and enhance the logistics communication. As Sonia already mentioned, collaboration is key. Port community systems are critical trade facilitation tools combining the simplification of operational processes with that of the regulatory requirements to allow for a seamless flow of goods through the port. Due to these efficiencies, a PCS contributes towards the port users' benefits from an optimized logistic chain. Actually, is digitalization of these port processes something new? No, actually. The first port community systems were developed in the late 1970s, as I was just starting my career in logistics. Nowadays, we see a growing demand of these kind of electronic tools. It's obvious that ports using a PCS benefits from a correct and timely distributed data. No need to find out if it is profitable, but just introduce same by a step-by-step approach. Smart savings in costs are a must. Supporting Barbados on the steps towards their PCS and single window ambitions is just one of the many activities of IPCSA that undertakes to support its members and the wider community. I will conclude by thanking Barbados Port, Barbados Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, and Barbados Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship for the support, and look forward to an interesting discussion and presentation from our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans. And so we're going to go right into the presentations. Our first presentation is going to be by Richard Morton, who is the Secretary General of the IPCSA. Richard spent his early career working in European road, sea, and air freight operations. In 2011, he was appointed as Secretary General of the European Port Community Systems Association, which in 2014 became the International IPCSA. This association provides a voice for electronic data interchange operators within the complete logistics sphere and all modes of air, sea, and land. IPCSA, whose global membership now operates in over 500 sea and airports, handling the electronic exchange of information for in excess of 500 million TEUs and 10 billion tons of cargo. In his role as Secretary General, Richard works to support international organizations on trade facilitation, including the United Nations, the World Customs Organization, World Trade Organization, the European Union, and the International Maritime Organization. He is also an expert for the UN CFAT and has been appointed for a second time to the APEC E-Commerce Business Alliance Expert Council. He also supports organizations around the world in how to develop community systems and single windows, drawing on the global experience and knowledge of IPCSA. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. As Hans said, it's a shame that we cannot be with you in person, but hopefully we'll be able to get across some of the areas around port community systems. So my area will be talking about the higher level elements of what a port community system, the benefits are, and the sort of things that small and medium-sized ports need to look at, and also trade facilitation. Some of the questions we've already had from the controller, I'm sure both Dwayne from Jamaica and Osama from Jabilty will be able to answer, as they have had very similar challenges in the setup of their port community systems. So hopefully you can all see my presentation now. This will be available afterwards for people to download from Barbados Port. So just a little bit about IPSCA as an association. We formed 9 years ago. We now have over 50 members operating in over 50 countries. And we have a number of them joining this call as well, from Belgium, from Djibouti, from France, who support us in our activities around the world. As Andrea mentioned, we now have members across the world covering over 500 sea ports, airports, and border crossings in landlocked countries. Because actually, when you look at trade facilitation, the processes within seaports or airports or cross borders are generally the same. It's a different mode, but your customs processes, your border controls are generally the same, which is why we have that membership. And we also have single window operators as members. Some operate port community systems and some are just trade single windows, such as Chinese Taipei. So what we try and do is share that knowledge from around the world with ports and airports in order to support them in developing, whether it's a port community system, a maritime single window or similar. To give you some idea, a lot of people will say to us, oh yes, but you just have the big players. Well, if you noticed in the middle there, we have Port St. Martin in the Caribbean. And then we have Lodging in China, which is the Chinese national logistics platform. So we have members of all sizes because they all have the same challenges, just in a different scale. And so actually we support all members in all of those activities, working with international organizations in order to support trade facilitation around the world. And just to give you some idea, we call ourselves an IPSCA family because our membership is very close. They share and exchange knowledge and information. And as of the 1st of this January this year, the Protect Group, which is a group of port authorities that develop and maintains electronic messages and data exchange in ports, integrated into IPSCA, bringing with it a number of the messages that it's designed in the last 20 years. But we have to communicate with our members, and we do that through our own bespoke members' social media network. We use digitalization in order to communicate with our members as much as our members use it to communicate with their users. And then finally, we launched our Network of Trusted Network, a trusted and neutral exchange initiative for cross-border and port-to-port information, which I'll explain in a few moments. So getting right to the subject now, after giving you some idea about the types of things that we as an international association focus on. And I think sometimes it's good to get back to basics and to avoid confusion. In different parts of the world, people see things differently. From a association point of view, we see port community systems. They generally focus on cargo, matching those logistical flow of information, the business to business, the business to government, and government to business, with those of the administrative flows. So they link into port authorities and other elements or single windows. Some parts of the world are looking at maritime single windows or port single windows. And that focus very much is around the port regulatory requirements, the IMO FAL guidance, FAL forms that are required to be reported electronically in ports around the world. And that looks at business to government, government to business, and government to government, relating to connecting all of the administrations together. And then you go up to the highest level, which is the national single window, or trade single window, as it may be called, where they bring in all of the parties together to allow for a single submission of information. Generally, again, for regulatory requirements. However, in some countries, such as Morocco, they started with a port community system and it became the national single window, the trade single window for Morocco, covering 14 ports, 5 airports, and 28 government agencies, allowing trade in Morocco to benefit from the simplification of processes. So it's always useful to start at that point. And again, this is very high level. So for those users of a potential Barbados port community system, this is more of the higher level strategic area where the governments need to focus their attention. But what do we see a port community system as? We see it as a trade facilitation tool. It's about connecting existing or new systems. It's not about creating a single IT system that governs everything. It's about exchanging information between existing systems, whether they be regulatory systems such as customs or border controls or phytosanitary, or traders' own systems, their own networks, their agents, their shipping lines. And so we very much see this as a single submission of information, and that's what the port community system actually supports. And not to forget that the port community system is the only exchange platform that is linking the operational information, where are the goods in the port at a time, with the administrative situation or process, which is what status are my goods? Are they customs cleared? Are they cleared for inspection? So it should be noted that it's a process-driven approach. Everybody talks about data. Data is only useful if it's linked to a process. You can have all the data you like, but it has to be linked to the customs declaration process. So I think that's worthwhile just reviewing. So we've talked a bit about port community systems, and Andrea and Sonia quite aptly talked about the open and neutral electronic platform. But let's focus around a port community system is not really an IT project, but a change management project. It is about changing attitudes in both traders, government authorities and stakeholders to ensure that they are working together. You have to change mindsets, and that's the biggest challenge. If it was just an IT problem, it'd be relatively simple. The challenge is, can you get people to share and exchange data? Who is the trusted party? And the key part of a port community system is that they are a trusted third party. And a typical port community system is like this. It's connecting, as I said, those existing or new systems with all of the stakeholders in the port. It's not about one system, it's about taking information from one party, giving it to another, and allowing that to be translated into the suitable format that the parties need. It's a bit like Google Translate. You will get information, you'll put information in and you get information out that says the same thing, but in a different format or different language. And that allows all of the parties to receive information in one way and send information in one way, and the next party receive it in another. And that's one of the value of the port community systems. But again, focus around processes. It's not just about exchanging data, it's about the processes that that data relates to. As Hans has already said, port community systems started in the late 70s. So it's not new. And I think that's something that surprises people when you say that in the late 1970s and early 1980s, data was being exchanged electronically. Most people think it's something that's happened in the 2000s. So what have we seen in terms of the development? You've got your traditional data exchange platforms. We're now looking at networking of those port community systems and single windows around the world. And then you're moving forward into the intelligence systems, where port community systems merge into intelligence systems to actually help predict what information, what challenges there might be in movements of goods to reduce bottlenecks in trade. And when we talk about single window as well, single window port community systems, they both do similar things. They exchanging information between different parties. They're just, the parties that are involved may be different for a different purpose. So in terms of the higher level side of things, what are the benefits? It's neutral, you can trust it. You can share your information as an agent and no other agent will be able to see that information. As a freight forwarder, as a shipping line, your information is secure. They're relatively low cost in terms of development compared to many of the other solutions that you will see. And they're called community systems for a reason. It's a community solution created by technology, not a software solution. I am sure you will hear later on that it's bringing the whole community on board, whether it's government agencies competing for different roles, or whether it and have different viewpoints, or whether it's the trade worried about sharing information between different parties. But the port community system is a neutral and trusted party and therefore can exchange that data simply between all of the parties involved. And again, focus around community. The community is key. So earlier this year with COVID, we produced some guidelines for port community systems for small and medium-sized ports. Why did we do that? Because we were getting more and more requests from ports around the world saying, can you help us? We don't know where to start. And so we decided to create some simple guidelines to allow ports to almost self-assess themselves for their readiness, rather than going to very expensive consultants and getting a report which they telling them what they knew already. So we created 12 simple steps, which are in line with our general guidelines on how to develop a port community system. But these are broad steps. You have to adapt them to your environment. And that's the other thing about port community systems. It's very difficult to buy an off-the-shelf port community system because you have to take into account the local environment, the stakeholders, the regulatory requirements, the port requirements, the language, those types of things. So buying one off the shelf doesn't always produce the solution that you believe it will, because it hasn't started from the bottom up, which is working with the community to develop the processes that are critical for them in the ports. And overall, the guidelines help support the digitalization of ports. But importantly, we didn't categorize what a small or medium-sized port is. That's normally the first question people ask us. Why? Well, if you take a port in the Caribbean, it might be a small port compared to Rotterdam or Shanghai, but in the Caribbean, it may be a large port. So you have to take it into context. So that's why we didn't categorize, because you will know where you are as a port within your region and how that works for you. And you can then help compare that with other ports around the world. Actually, in 2011, we developed our guide on how to develop a port community system. Again, a very simple guide of 12 steps. But actually, it's only when you start getting to steps 9 and 10 do you really look at information technology. The rest is about bringing the community together. And that guide is still being used today around the world in ports such as Abu Dhabi, where they developed Magda Gateway. They use this guide as a way of showing them how to develop their port community system and sharing information with others, and that communication with the community is one of the key elements. So within our guide for small and medium-sized ports, we came up with 12 steps again. These are in line with the guide I just showed you. The first is create a common understanding. For those that have been involved in maritime single windows, I see representatives of the International Maritime Organization that have joined. Long discussions are held between different member states, between different ports about what is a single window, what is a maritime single window, what does it mean? So again, the first thing you need to do is create that common understanding so that your users within a port know what a port community system is. Once you've done that, you then need to look at what you have in the port already. If you don't have a terminal operating system and it's still done manually, to start looking towards a port community system will be a challenge because you're missing a key piece of the puzzle. And we know some ports in the Caribbean struggle to find suitable terminal operating systems at a price that is suitable to them. So again, you need to do a digital review. Where are you with maritime single window? Have you implemented a maritime single window through your port? If you have, you're already exchanging information. Can that be used as the basis for a port community system? So as a port, you know what you have and you know your national environment, so review it. Constantly throughout the process, then look at stakeholder engagement and feedback. Working with the users or potential users is critical. And that should be an ongoing element throughout the process. Then you look at business and business models and governance models. You need the right business and operating model to make sure, one, it's sustainable, two, it's resilient, and three, it's neutral and trusted. And in different countries, that may mean different things. It might be a completely private company that has a concession for a port community system. It might be a private company that historically developed the port community system and is now running it and is trusted by the stakeholders. It might be the Port Authority. It might be a single window. So again, making sure you have the right governance in place ensures that users trust the port community system to exchange potentially commercial information with the parties that they wish to do it. You then need to look at the infrastructure options for the technology. Are you cloud-based? Some ports may not even have a fully operational IT department. They may have one person that is doing that part-time, depending on the size. So you have to consider the type of infrastructure options that you have. Do you manage it yourself? Is it a cloud-based? Is it a service-based structure? And of course, data security and understanding of that. One of the big things that comes up is my data secure? Somebody can hack into it. And that's something that is core to the business and operating model. You can't be trusted if you can't keep your data secure. But it's also about what we users of port community systems. They need to ensure that their data security, long gone are the days where you can have a yellow post-it note stuck onto your screen with your passwords on. And that still happens today. And so with cybersecurity, it's always users can be sometimes the weakest link because they're not used to the cybersecurity protocols that are required. We then go into the final 6 steps. No big bang. Don't try and create one system that does everything in one go. How many times do we see governments fail with implementing IT solutions? Look at it on a modular basis, on a phased basis. Plan it. That takes you to plan, review, share, and implement. Constantly plan and change and update. Analyze your processes. Review them with the stakeholders. Share in advance of any implementation so that they are part of the process. And then you can launch it with them. And we can't stress enough the communication. Communication is critical. Telling people what is happening, telling them the good, the bad, and the ugly, making sure that they can actually understand the challenges that there are for this and where they can help. And again, look at international standards. We know ASACUDA has its own standards from UNTDED, UN Trade Development Directory. And again, how do you do that? How can you use those standards? Is that for the PCS, or will you need to use the shipping line standards that they currently use, such as EDIFACT or the future APIs? And also, if you're dealing with maritime, you have just released this week last week, is the IMO FAL 5 Circular 43 on the revised IMO electronic compendium on facilitation and electronic business. That is a data model that is going to have all of the data elements required for maritime. And it's harmonized with the International Standards Organization, the World Customs Organization, and UN CFACT. And that's where the International Maritime Organization has had great success in bringing the different standards organizations together. So it allows choice for which standards to use, but provides interoperability between them. And with technology, don't follow the herd. Just because you hear about, let's say, blockchain as an example, doesn't mean it's the right one for you. Make sure you choose a technology that is appropriate to your processes, that is appropriate to your business. And always remember that if you want to stay the same, if you want to stay doing what you're currently doing, you do have to change. And with COVID as it is, you are still moving goods through your ports, people through your ports. And that you're going to continue doing that, but you have to change the way you do it to allow for the restrictions that are in place in the digitalization. So just to re-emphasize, make sure that your businesses drive the processes, so your community drives those processes and understands them. Those processes drive the technology that you choose, and then that technology enables those businesses to do better and more efficient business. It's about collaboration, it's about planning, and it's about investment. There are some links there to some useful documents in terms of some of the things I've talked about for port community systems. But just before I finish, I'll talk about globalization. One of the things that ports are involved in is a global world. It is about sharing and exchanging information. Transparency is required by the supply chain more and more. You can track cargo from eBay or Amazon or Alibaba with a click of a button. You can't do that in many maritime flows. And so what as IPSCA did on the 1st of July, we launched our network of trusted networks, which is a neutral and not-for-profit platform enabling the cross-border exchange of data between ports and countries. This combines the contractual flow, as in what can I do with this data, who can do something with it and what they do, as well as the operational flow of that data. And it is purely for port to port and cross-border. We have standard APIs, interfaces that can be used. As we said, structural contractual flows. And the data is encrypted. We don't store the data. We're not interested in the data. It's not about mining data or big data. For us, it's about making sure that those who share the data know who it is being shared with and have total control over it. All we know is that something has been shared. The port community systems and single windows already do authentication of all of their users at a local level. So you have a level of trust which isn't there at the moment in many platforms when they share information between different parties. And it also allows that the different platforms maintain their current models. They don't need to adapt. But what does that mean? Well, in the first instance, our catalogue of APIs include port call information. How do you share that information on estimated time of arrivals, departures, actual time of arrivals between ports? And more importantly for users is, what is the status of my cargo? If cargo leaves Barbados and goes to Antwerp, you'll be able to identify that it's landed in Antwerp and the cargo status of those goods and whether they've left the port, simply by connecting your port community system with that of the Port of Antwerp. And this initiative has already seen success. We now have 42 seaports in over 14 countries signed up to be part of it, and also 10 airports as well. And we have many of our members who have shown interest, but of course COVID has meant their priorities have been to focus on the processes within their ports, and they're looking towards 2021 to be part of this network. So overall, when you're looking at port community systems, think about the community first and foremost, and the technology solution as supporting and enabling that community to manage their processes better. Hopefully that's given you some idea around what port community systems are, how they support single windows as trade facilitation tools. And you'll hear more about details of what a port community system does from colleagues from Jamaica and Jabilty shortly. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So we'll move right along and now hear from specific case studies from around the world. And we are going to hear now from Mr. Warsama Gire, who is the CEO of the Jabilty port. And just for further information, he's the managing director at the Jabilty Port Community Systems, has been managing the PCS from its inception in 2016 until its launch in 2018. He has also worked as technology director at the Jabilty Ports and Free Zones Authority, handling large-scale tech projects for Jabilty International Free Trade Zone, Jabilty National Shipping Company, Air Jabilty, Port Authority, Port Secure Jabilty, amongst others. His expertise is in digital services, business to business, as well as business to government, and tech project management in the transportation and government sectors. And Mr. Warsama, I would like you just to confirm that I have pronounced your last name correctly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. You did that correctly. Let me share the presentation. Okay. So basically, I'll be presenting a perspective of like building a PCS from Jabilty, and the choices that we have made in terms of the conception of a port community system are linked to our local needs and logistics, basically. So I'll be giving some background information that will justify basically those choices when we were setting up the port community system in Jabilty. So Jabilty is a small country in East Africa. Population is less than 1 million, around 960K. The economy is a service-based economy, especially focused on maritime and logistics services. So being a small country, we also serve as a maritime gateway for Ethiopia, which is around 18 million people. So 85%, it's understandable that 85% of our transactions of basically import-exports are towards transit to Ethiopia. So in order to develop those activities, we have invested $1.2 billion building new ports and free zones. Ports are like specialized ports, for example, general cargo specialized ports, terminal containers, multi-purposes, and also we have a salt export port to export our local products. We are also put a lot of focus on free zones because a lot of industrials, they go to Ethiopia to set up factories, and they use Jabilty as a logistics base. And they are very interested in setting up free trade companies to avoid taxes because most of their imports, exports are going to Ethiopia. So we have developed 3 specialized free trade zones for general trading, light industry, and energy products. Energy products because there were recently some findings in Ethiopia when it comes to oil and gas. So we are currently building a pipeline from Ethiopia to Djibouti to export it from Djibouti. So this is a map of the area. So you have, you can see Djibouti is at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is between Yemen and Africa. So we have around 30,000 ships passing along our coastline every year. So one of our strategies is to provide better maritime services for those ships passing very close to our ports. In terms of transshipment, we're trying to attract transshipment business. For that, we have recently set up feeding services through Djibouti Shipping Company. And we have also increased the maritime services such as bunkering services, where we provide oil or I would say fuel bunkering in the high seas. So as you can see, we are very much focused towards regional integration, especially Ethiopia, to provide all the transit services to Ethiopia. But also recently, we have signed agreements with South Sudan in partnership with Ethiopia, where we are looking to reach the landlocked countries in Africa, basically, specifically South Sudan and Central African Republic. In partnership still with Ethiopia, a lot of the roads and connections between Ethiopia and South Sudan is in bad state. So this commitment was basically, there was a commitment from Ethiopia to build those roads, and they have started working on that, physically started working on that. When it comes to the rail connections, they have building a rail connection between Addis Ababa and Juba. That work is still pending due to the situation in South Sudan. So as you can see, this is the background, situation in Djibouti. So if we want all those basically companies, import-export companies in neighboring countries to use Djibouti, we have focused specifically on cargo tracking and equipment tracking as well when it comes to trucks and trains. So about Djibouti Port Community System. Djibouti Port Community System is set up under Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority. Has been set up to digitalize different processes linked to importing and exporting through the ports, airports, rail, and corridor. So this is the setup. Basically, Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority owns all the ports, free zones, the airline, to the road corridor as well company. So this entity comes directly under the presidency and does not go through the Ministry of Transport. And this, they have been allowed this freedom to invest along international partners in all these infrastructures to better serve the strategic vision of improving the maritime and logistics services in Djibouti. So most of the connections we have made, integration we have made with the ports and the different ports and free zones are basically our sister companies, and it was quite easy to set it up. We only have Custom, who is a partner in this project under the Ministry of Budget, and our partner, the Customs, have been very accommodating, especially recently. And we have started integrating, especially on the manifest, which is coming due this coming month in November. So these are the stakeholders: customs, the port authority, the seaports, rail operators. We have finalized the connection with the seaports. We are currently working on rail, and after that, we are going to move on to the airline. So we have the freight forwarders and shipping agents and free zone importers and exporters, because a lot of the importers and exporters in Djibouti are based in the free zones. And we have also the banks for the online payments. These are the features. There are around 6 to 7 main features that have been developed in phases. So we have the vessel management, anything to do with vessel registration, vessel ship particulars, which used to be sent, the documentation of the vessel used to be sent to 3 or 4 different parties in the past. Now, as long as they register online once, the documentation, it is approved by the port authority, and the database is available, the registry is available for all the ports to use. This has also simplified the activities of the shipping agents, as they only have to register a vessel once until when their next documents are due in the next 5 years or 6 years. So we have arrival and departure management, which is compliant with the IMO 7 file forms, dangerous goods, crew list, all these documentation, vessel arrival, cargo declaration, all of these are basically submitted online, approved by the port authority. You only have the berth application that is approved by the terminal operator. So we also have the cargo management, anything to do with loading list, unloading list submission from the shipping agents. What else? Basically, you have the forwarding businesses documentation for the cargo clearance. You have custom integration. We have recently finalized development on customs. We are currently in testing phase and due to release next month. We have e-gate appointment for the ports and anything to do with booking your slot for the delivery of the containers or the cargo, and the printing of port gate pass. Transit corridor services are very important since they help keep track of incoming tracks and outgoing tracks. And at the same time, they provide visibility to the final customer in the neighboring country, Ethiopia, where they can see whether the truck has gone through a checkpoint, or basically what type of container it was carrying, and all these type of things. And you have also the integrated online payment, which is specific to the port community business, anything to do with B2G or B2B. Even like we have recently introduced the payments between the shipping agents and the forwarders. So these are the services that are available for the shipping agents. So like we have talked about, vessel registration, arrival report, vessel arrival declaration, departure declaration, and berth request, mooring request, tug request, e-manifest for the submission of manifest, loading and unloading list, invoices, pay plan, e-port clearance. E-port clearance was very important in our community, because before that they had to go physically to the port authority and request signed port clearance for the vessel to leave our ports. And since recently, they only have to request it online. The approval is online, and they can just send it to the vessel master through email, and the vessel can leave our ports basically. So this example of the port community system dashboard, where the shipping agents can check the performance of the port, even like how long before the berth request was approved, and they can even check the performance of their own agents, staff. We have seen that for a number of cases, the staff did not submit properly the documentation on time, and there was a lot of basically complaints where the ports were charging the shipping agents for late submission or for non-submission, and the shipping agents were saying they have submitted the documentation and everything. So with the introduction of this port community system, everything is recorded, and even the management of the shipping agents company, they can check the performance of their staff. Basically, they're doing the properly and submitting the required documentation online on time. Well, these are the freight forwarding services, the e-delivery order, DO invoice. We have recently digitalized the interaction between the shipping agents and the forwarding agents, especially with the delivery of the DO documents. We have specific cases in Djibouti where they do not have to submit the original bill of lading, because the original bill of lading is the main thing that forces the forwarding agent to go to shipping agents to retrieve, to submit or provide the original bill of lading and get the delivery order. So in certain cases, for the multimodal, we call it the multimodal process. They don't have to do it. They don't have to go there physically. They can submit it online and pay online and get their e-delivery order online. So you have also the port fees invoice, where they can track, basically they can request the port fees invoice. They get the draft, they pay online if they want to. Once they pay, and they're provided with the final invoice. And they also have in their account all the payments they have submitted to the ports, and this is very useful for them. In case they lose some documents, they lose some invoices, they can still print it from the system. All the invoices that were provided by the ports, the port authority, all these different entities. So online invoicing is integrated, and transport order, booking, pre-gate booking of the slots for the containers, gating, gate out tracking, all these services are online. And you also have an export services like freight booking, shipping notes, empty return, empty release, all these type of services. We're working on custom declaration, which is due to be finalized at the end of next month or the beginning of December. And also finally, we have the corridor road pass for the trackers. For example, once they load the containers or they load the cargo, if they go into Ethiopia, they have to pay the corridor road fees since they're taking the road. So they can do it online. They can print the ticket or the certificate online, and then they can go straight to Ethiopia. The free zone companies were like, okay, guys, you're digitalizing the forwarding, the shipping agents, you're providing services online. We use those services, but we also want to have our free zone services there. They were using, because the free zone company can act as the forwarder themselves. So they were missing this part. So this is a request that was made by the free zone companies. They wanted to do all the administrative services for their companies within the free zone through the system. So these services, the only one that has a direct, basically relation with the cargo is the free zone gate pass. So the free zone gate pass also, any trucks or movement of the goods moving in and out of the free zones has to have a gate pass. This gate pass can be printed through DPCS, and through that printing and the scanning of the pass, we are able to track it. And we are able to provide transparency to the final importer or exporter in Ethiopia about the movement of his goods or their goods in Djibouti. So these tracking services are provided mainly for the mostly for the logistics companies or the final importers, exporters in a neighboring country in Ethiopia. They can track the vessel status and container cargo tracking, the gate in and gate out of the ports in terms of trucks and cargo. They can even track the documentation, whether the booking of the time slot has been made, whether the documentation has been started, whether the invoice has been requested. All these documentation can be tracked, the process can be tracked also from the neighboring countries, or the final customer can track it. And we have even recently included the tracking of invoices. For example, there are certain cases where because the neighboring countries, logistics companies, they have to rely on a local company to pay for them and to request to be paid back, for example. For example, they pay the port fees for them, and then they add their service fees and everything, and they request to be paid back from the neighboring countries' logistics company. So what happens is that if the invoice has been, if there's a fraud and the right amount has not been basically displayed, the neighboring countries' customer can check through DPCS the correct amount of that particular invoice if they have the invoice number, and they are able to see it from our system, the correct amount of the invoice itself. So these are the from the manual process to the online process, the difference. The manual process used to take about 1 working day. Now, if they go online, they can finalize the process. Normally, they should finalize the process in 1 hour. Thus, the target has been placed. And but we see that the average completion time is 110 minutes, so just below 2 hours. So we are working towards the 1 hour objective, but right now the average we are getting is 110 minutes, which is around 1 hour and 50 minutes, I think. The custom clearance is online, but is done through Asecura instead of DPCS while we are finalizing the integration. So currently they're using 2 systems, and for all the port documentation and port processes, they use DPCS. For the clearance of declaration, they use Asecura. They're still able to achieve 2 hours or just below 2 hours as well for the complete finalization of the documentation. So these are to give you an idea of the different offices that the forwarder, typical forwarder, has to visit like 2 or 3 times a day to finalize the documentation. So this is the reason why it takes them around 1 full working day, because they have to get the invoice from the ports, they have to go to customs for the declaration, they have to go back, prepare the check, come back again for the booking of the slots, and provide all these documents to the driver of the track to get or receive the containers of cargoes from the ports. So through digitalization, we are able to reduce that timeline to just below 2 hours. So these are some of the documents that they can print through the system, and that can be tracked as well based on the activities they are doing at the time. So we have the port clearance certificate, online port clearance certificate, where it's required for the vessel to leave. You have the port gate pass that has to be scanned at the gate in, and for the gate out to receive EDI from the port as soon as the gate out of the container happens, and we are able to display that in our system. You have the Djibouti Corridor Road Pass ticket, which has to be scanned in at least 3 different checkpoints while leaving the Djibouti towards Ethiopia. And once they get past these checkpoints, the final customer are able to see the progression of the cargo towards the neighboring country. This is an example of what a typical customer may see if they search for a gate out, particular gate out. They can search by bill of lading, they can search by truck number, and they're able to see the time of the truck, the gate in and the gate out time. They can see the weight of the cargo, the cargo name. This is a particular bulk cargo weight, and this is for transit. So they're able to check all this information. And this is also to combat a sort of black market that happened in Djibouti, still happens from time to time, where the truckers are sent from Ethiopia, neighboring country, to Djibouti. And instead of bringing the cargo straight to Ethiopia, they stay for a couple of days and they work inside the country. And they try to bring cargo that they were not supposed to. And the final customer is being delayed because of that. So now, to increase the transparency, the final customer can check if the truck they have commissioned to bring out their cargo is what they are doing in Djibouti, basically. Are they transporting my cargo? Are they transporting some other person's cargo? All this can be checked at the port gate in, gate out, and the tracking of the corridor. So this is another example for container gate tracking, in and out with the container number and the truck license number. This is an addition that was requested by customers in Ethiopia. They don't know whenever the empty truck comes to Djibouti, they're not sure, or that truck, like I've said earlier, that truck can basically try and work, try and find some work in Djibouti while the customer is waiting for them. So in order to basically provide more transparency, we kind of show them, or they can basically check from the system if the truck has arrived in Djibouti. Empty truck they have sent has arrived in Djibouti and what time they have arrived, all this type of information. So these are the advantages, some of the advantages we have seen so far for the last bit more than 2 years of operation. So single submission facility has basically simplified the submission for the shipping agents. Berth allocation response time was reduced from 72 hours to 1 hour. A lot of these gains are directly due to digitalization. Instead of the person going all the way to the port, they can submit it online and get the approval online. And based on that, we have managed to save a lot of time. And there was also a 1 hour response time regulation enforced by Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority for all the port services, anything to do with berth allocation or response time. All these response times, they have to do it within 1 hour. For the e-port clearance, they were able to save 5 hours and up to $650 for shipping agents, because most of the time the vessel had to basically leave the berth and wait for this document, the port clearance document, physical document, at the anchorage. So they had to hire a tugboat for $650 and bring this document directly to the vessel master. So due to the digitalization of the port clearance, now they don't have to do that anymore. They can just get the approval online and submit the document to the provided document to the vessel master online or by email. The forward port documentation process, invoicing, slot booking, has been reduced from a full working day to an average of 110 minutes. We still have a lot of improvements to do on that side, and we can improve it up to 1 hour. This is what the goal we are working towards. The system has enabled better visibility of documentation process for logistics community, as well as the approval times and of authorities. For example, Port Authority approval, all these different approval times were not transparent before, prior to the implementation of the port community system. Now we can follow up and we can see whether the approval times have improved or basically they are worsening. So this transparency has basically contributed to faster approval times from the authorities. Better tracking of cargoes, of trucks specifically in the transit corridor. Before the implementation of the port community system, there was no way of knowing whether for the final customer, whether the truck has arrived in Djibouti or not yet. Increased visibility for the importers and exporters in Ethiopia, neighboring country, for the freight forwarders activities, like document submission and approval time. They can, not only for truck and cargo tracking, they can also track the documentation process at the same time. So these are the advantages we have seen so far, and we still have a lot of work to do. We want to basically integrate trains, statuses, and train documentation as well in the near future, in the next 2 to 3 months. And after that, we still got the airline as well for the air cargo to integrate. And we have also been asked to integrate with the sanitary and photosanitary certifications for the local products. When they live in the ports, they need these health certificates basically to certify them for local consumptions. So it's under the Ministry of Agriculture, and we have started discussions with them on how we can basically include them in this integration with the cargo process. So that's it from my side, and thank you. And I'll be willing to take your questions later on after the presentations. Thank you, guys.
So thank you very much, Mr. Gira, and let's not carry further because I'm really anxious for us to get to the questions. I'm going to ask Mr. Dwayne Powell to deliver his presentation. And just a little bit about Dwayne. He is currently the director for the Port Community System Operator for Jamaica. He has been leading a national strategic project for Jamaica since April 2012 at the Port Authority of Jamaica, whereby a port community system will be implemented and operationalized for Jamaica. He currently interacts on an ongoing basis with the private sector, government and multilateral agencies with respect to strategies and plans for improving the cargo trade and logistics within Jamaica, thus ultimately improving the doing business landscape. He was formerly the director of the Information Management Unit at the Jamaica Customs Department from 2009 to 2012, where he was responsible for providing full information communications technology support to all customs locations within Jamaica, and also custom relations support for all internal and external clients, which includes shipping agents, brokers, and importers within the trade environment. Currently holds a certificate in project management from UWI, customs risk management certification from the SEDET Foundation, and has a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science and business management from the University of Technology, Jamaica, and an MBA from the University of New Orleans. Dwayne?
Thank you, Andrea. Morning, everybody. I'm going to be giving you a brief presentation on our Jamaica Port Community System project. I was thinking about, in terms of the presentation and in terms of the other guests that are here, the other experts that have presented, and I think that the presentation so far have been very good. Feel free, as I said, to ask any questions through the chat and we'll try and answer them. All right, so the presentation that I tried to configure for today is really divided into two main areas. I'll be focusing on, in terms of the activities that we undertook initially at the start of the project, and then I'll draw very quickly in terms of some of the features and services that we have. Richard would have gone through this already, but it's always good to reiterate that a PCS is a neutral and open electronic platform. I really want to focus on that. That enables intelligent and secure exchange of information. And ultimately, I know that within the Caribbean, the discussion on customs, single windows, and port community systems is something that has been going on for a long time. It's still ongoing when you speak to the different countries, etc., in terms of the interpretation and the official definition for these various systems. As it relates to Jamaica, in recent times, Jamaica has undertaken a number of major trade facilitation initiatives, I would say within the last 4 years. Predominantly, Jamaica Customs has undertaken through UNCTAD to implement Asicuda World. One of our major terminal operators within Jamaica has recently implemented Navis, and Kingston Wharves Limited have also been utilizing Tideworks as their terminal operating system. So we have, from the terminal operator side, relatively modern terminal operating systems. In recent times, I think in 2019, the government of Jamaica signed a contract also with UNCTAD to implement electronic single window. And this project will be spearheaded by Jamaica Customs in collaboration with the regulatory agencies. And this project is focused predominantly on the license, permits, and certificates. Approximately 2 years ago also, the Ministry of Industry and Commerce undertook to implement in Jamaica what is called a Jamaica Trade Information Portal, TIP. And this portal gives importers, exporters, business operators, etc., all of the details, relevant information detail related to importing goods, exporting goods, etc., the procedures, the costs, etc., which we think was a very good project. And also the Port Authority of Jamaica commenced implementation in 2016 of a port community system. Ultimately, what do we want to do in terms of from a port community system standpoint? We want to turn paper into data. When we started this project, and it's still to a lesser extent now, the fact that in Jamaica we had a lot of very archaic processes, we had a lot of paper-driven processes, and you know, with paper, all of the risks that are associated with paper. And what we try to do is to re-engineer a lot of the processes before we try to automate and digitize them. When we started the project, in terms of our strategic objectives, we wanted to comply with international standards. Jamaica itself has a strategic goal in terms of becoming a logistics hub, and ultimately we wanted to empower economic growth by providing the business community with an easier way of doing business. Some of the key features for the PCS are we wanted to reduce paper as much as possible. I think for me, paperless is a misnomer, but that's a different discussion. As I said, we wanted to streamline a lot of the procedures, and I'll explain later on in the presentation how we did that. But business process reengineering is a key component. You see me repeating certain key terms throughout the presentation. Change management, business process reengineering, and engagement and communication are key pillars for the success of any major project like this. The system is event driven. We have to obviously integrate, and data security is paramount to our activities. In terms of the port community system, we see it as a single window for trade, logistic, business processes, and that would include business to government activities, and government to government activities also. And ultimately, we want to optimize, collaborate, and obviously automate. In terms of Jamaica's scope, it does cover both maritime and air. We have implemented the various modules in phases. We had focused on the maritime sector first, and we are at the tail end of the project now, where we are now focusing on air. So we expect by once things go well, by the first quarter of 2021, we should have started in terms of the implementation of air processes. So ultimately, what do we want to do? We want to try and streamline a lot of the procedures through the PCS, which is a message broker, and to integrate with a number of the various stakeholders. What we had seen previously is the fact that a number of the stakeholders have invested in their systems, in their resources, but a lot of these systems were not able to communicate with the other stakeholders. And as you can appreciate, in terms of a streamlined logistics chain or even the supply chain, the sharing of information, real-time information is critical to everybody in terms of companies anticipating the processes, when they can get their cargo, consistent and reliable processes. The port community system is a very large project within any country. It's a major project, and as such, it has a number of different stakeholders. And one of the key things that you must understand with this project is that you have to engage and communicate from a very early stage. Do not leave out. Our first recommendation is that do not leave out any of the stakeholders. They may be small stakeholders, whether in terms of numbers or size, but everybody must have a chance to come to the table and to present their thoughts, etc. So what is the first move in terms of Jamaica's perspective? We had government and private sector buy-in. In 2012, the project was started in earnest by a cabinet decision that was done by the government of Jamaica. But even before that decision, the Shipping Association of Jamaica have been strong proponents of a PCS. They had undertaken various studies. Their members would have seen other countries that would have utilized and seen the benefits of a port community system, and they have always been very vocal and very strong proponents. So we had both the private sector buying and the government buying at that point in time. Jamaica Customs Agency, in that cabinet decision, was made a partner with the Port Authority of Jamaica being the lead agency. And that was very, very strategic. When implementing any major trade facilitation project, you must ensure that customs is with you. And that cannot be understated. Customs plays such a significant role, whether from a legislative standpoint, whether from a data sharing standpoint, whether from an enforcement of process standpoint. And so we were very strategic in terms of ensuring that customs was with us throughout the project. Customs would know that we've had a lot of discussions, a lot of back and forth in terms of processes, etc. But they have always been a very good partner with us. And obviously, the Shipping Association of Jamaica was made a strategic stakeholder, and they have also been very vocal. They have played a very important role in terms of the rollout of the processes, in terms of providing us with feedback, telling us what can work, what cannot work, etc. What is the second move? Knowing that you do not know. So at the time, Jamaica did not have the institutional capacity to undertake a PCS by itself. And what we did at the time was to acquire consultants to assist us in terms of scoping and crafting the project. And so the Port Authority had acquired consultants to assist us with the RFP creation because of the fact that we were going to be doing an international tender. The consultants would have assisted us also with the legal analysis, because you do have to look at all of the different pieces of legislation surrounding with the customs, the port, etc., in terms of data sharing, etc., etc. How do you make the port community system compulsory? We also looked at port processes and refined those port processes. So we would have had in-house our own business process reengineering exercise before we even went out. So we would have had an understanding of what we wanted. The commercial viability of a PCS is paramount in terms of your analysis also, because of the fact that it does take capital to build out, it does take capital to operate. In terms of best practices, we always recommend that you have a PCS operator, which should be a body that should be in charge of both implementing, training, providing help desk services and technical support to the PCS itself. We also looked at the technological implications because of the fact that obviously at the heart of it, it is a system that must integrate with a number of various systems, whether from the shipping lines, whether from the terminal operators, whether from customs, Asikuda World, or whatever other custom system you may have. And then obviously we have to look at the commercial model that you would be pursuing. Just a FYI, Jamaica initially, when we started our project in 2012, we started it out as a PPP project, a public-private partnership. And the thought process at the time was that we would have gotten an external vendor to come in to provide the resources to build out the system, and then they would recuperate their fees through a PCS tariff that would have been implemented. We went through that process, and that was a very important process because we would have learned a lot of things, but ultimately Jamaica decided to go through a contract service in terms of a regular contract where the Port Authority would have provided upfront financing for the project, and then ultimately we will charge the community at a point in time once we have fully implemented the project. So the commercial model is very important, especially for a number of ports that may be smaller and you have to look at return on investment. In terms of the third move, we would have then done an international tender. As I said, we would have selected our PCS partner. From a governance standpoint, we would have created what is called a PCS steering committee, and this steering committee would oversee the entire process. So that steering committee would include both public and private sector stakeholders, the SHA, which is the Shipping Association of Jamaica, the Truckers Association, the Custom Brokers, the Freight Forwarders Association, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Transport, the Port Authority, Customs. So all of the major players within the sector would be at that table and would give their feedback, their recommendations, etc. And that committee still exists. We meet monthly. And then from that committee, if there are action items, then what we do is that we form working groups with the operational persons to go through any other issues, come up with solutions, recommendations, new processes, and then we filter that back into the steering committee. So it's a very cyclical process in terms of how we find the solutions. The fourth move is change management, business process reengineering, and engage. And you have to repeat. As would have been said by a number of the presenters earlier, the project is a change management initiative. Don't make the mistake in terms of the cliche of making this project into an IT project or assign it to IT persons. It's predominantly a change management project. Yes, it does have an IT component, but it's really a change management initiative in terms of the processes, in terms of how you go about really changing how businesses do business on a daily basis. And it's very important that that mantra is consistent throughout the project. Clearly define the scope of the project. In any port community, for every port community that I've looked at, there are always challenges, right? Different challenges based on the maturity of the port. And as such, in terms of the scope of your project, you have to be very specific in terms of what you want to do as it relates to a port community system and what port community systems generally do. Because of the fact that once you start to engage your stakeholders, whether it be customs or the port community, there will always be needs. And you have to be very careful that you don't try to change your scope to try to meet all of those needs. And then what you have is a mismatch with what really and truly a port community system should be doing, right? It's not an end all or fix all for all of the problems, but it will move any port along the chain in terms of once you have it implemented and running properly. Business process reengineering, as I've said earlier, is a key pillar. We have a very specific governance model within Jamaica, whereby for every process that we're going to be automating or digitizing, we map the current process, we re-engineer it, and then we meet with the stakeholders that it impacts. We code it into the system. And so therefore, it always gives the stakeholders an opportunity to provide feedback. It always gives them the opportunity to know what is coming before we make that change. And then obviously, as I said, you have to engage and communicate with all stakeholders repeatedly. So we do have a mechanism where we're always communicating with the agents committee, with the truckers, with the brokers, etc., on an ongoing basis. So in terms of our rollout methodology, as I said, we would have had our business process reviews. We would have done our customization. As a FYI, Jamaica's port community system is cloud-based. So we are partners with Microsoft. We use Microsoft Azure, and that has been going very, very well since we have been using them. We do training. We always start with a pilot phase. So we don't start, even when the module is completed and ready to be rolled out to the environment, we always start with a pilot phase with a select number of stakeholders to see if there are any things that we would have missed, etc. And then once we complete the pilot phase, then we go live and we go to the support phase. And so this process or methodology is always taken in terms of all of the modules that we would have had throughout the life of the project. In terms of our port community system, we focused on 6 main pillars, which is reporting. So I'm sure we'll have some more discussions on it, but all manifests, one of the first and one of the biggest challenges we had initially was to convince customs, but all manifests now, maritime manifests, because we haven't started with air as yet, but all maritime manifests do come through the port community system first, and then we then translate that and provide that to customs, and we also provide that information to the terminals, so the terminals use the manifest information that is sent by the PCS, and to also any other stakeholders that are authorized to receive it. We manage movement, and we'll discuss that later. We manage all of the authorizations because, as I said, we're fully integrated with Asikuda World. So we get all customs releases from customs, and we're also integrated with the terminals where we get the warehouse gate out authorization. So once you pay the terminals, their storage fees, etc., we do get that information from the terminals as one of the authorizations that we need before cargo can leave. And we are also integrated with a number of shipping lines whereby the shipping agents do have to provide us with an electronic delivery order. We would have recently rolled out this year our truck appointment system. We are now covering all imports at the 2 main terminals within Kingston. So for you to pick up containerized cargo, you do have to come through the PCS in terms of making appointments. We do provide track and trace to individuals, so you're able to, using your bill of lading or your container number, go within the PCS and see exactly what's going on, if it was manifested, if there's a customs release, if there's a electronic delivery order. We automatically notify persons who are authorized to receive the information once there is what is called a PCS gate out authorization. And that is typically composed of 4 main elements, which is the customs release, electronic delivery order, the warehouse authorization, and the identification of the trucker that would be coming to pick up the cargo. And then one of the things that we have been working on is also, as part of one of our strategic goals, is business intelligence. We do now provide reports, whether weekly or monthly, to various stakeholders because of the fact that we do have a lot of information, and we would have recently, just about 3 months ago or so, completed our data warehouse that we are using. So in terms of our PCS within Jamaica, we do cover manifests, bookings, bill of lading, house bills, area bills, etc. We manage all voyages and agent voyages. We manage also stuffing, stripping, and empty containers. For movement, we do receive all movements from the terminals in terms of gating, gate outs. We do receive discharge and loading lists, stuffing, and stripping reports, and we also provide access to specific stakeholders in terms of import and exporters. One of the things that we also recently implemented within Jamaica for exports is that the terminals now use the PCS to verify that export boxes are duly authorized by customs to enter the ports. And so what we do is that we get booking confirmations from the shipping agents. We do get the export release, and those data come together to provide you with a gate-in, a PCS gate-in authorization that the terminals use to ensure that export boxes are duly authorized. As I said, we are integrated with a number of different stakeholders, predominantly the terminals, the shipping lines, and also we do provide manifest information to a number of different governmental agencies who require it. So before, in terms of when we started with the truck appointment system, how we would do it is that persons would email the terminals a request for appointments, and that would not provide them with any visibility as it relates to the capacity. They would have to wait on somebody physically to confirm that the appointment was made, etc. And so the truck appointment system has been a big change. By the end of this year, we will implement the second phase of it, which will cover both exports and empty containers. And then we'll be working with the industry to refine these processes. As I said earlier, you have to always engage. So us rolling out the module is really just the start of the process, not the end, because of the fact that once you roll out, then what it does is that it impacts ultimately on how businesses do business, how the truckers arrange themselves, how the terminals arrange themselves, etc. And so it will always be a work in progress. The Customs Authority also has full access to the PCS, and they're able to trace and track real-time containers. It shows the status and the movement history and a number of other information that customs may be interested in. As I said, as we go forward, business intelligence is a key component, not only for the terminals and for the Port Authority and customs, but also for the private sector. And on a daily basis, we do get different reports, requests, etc., for key KPIs, etc. One of the things that we had started when we started the project was the fact that we wanted to identify a number of key KPIs, key performance indicators that we would be tracking, and those are some of the things that we still work on now on a weekly basis. So ultimately, what is the benefits to Jamaica? The core benefits for all parties involved are re-engineered processes, because of the fact that, as I said before, you don't want to layer on technology on inefficient processes. Higher efficiencies and speed regarding port processes, particularly through automation and reduction of paperwork. With the advent of COVID, a number of the processes would have been highlighted that we have been able to implement because of the fact that the PCS and also custom systems do allow you to provide the information to the relevant authorities through an online basis. So basically, that's it from us in terms of focusing on a number of the activities related to the preliminary processes that you would undertake in terms of acquiring a port community system. I'm sure there are a number of questions, but thanks.
Thanks very much, Dwayne. So we have there 3 very good presentations as well as additional expertise online, and we have lots of questions. I am hoping that the Controller of Customs is still on the call, because one of the very first questions coming in was posed for him. And in fact, I think there are a number of questions that have arisen about the integration of Execute World and how it has, how they plug and play, so to speak, with respect to the PCS. And that was one of the first questions that came up for the port. So I'm going to ask, first of all, well, there's one that is not necessarily PCS related, but it goes on. So this one is very targeted to Mr. Holder. So I will read the question. What is the status of the electronic single window that was funded by the Inter-American Development Bank in 2015 and built and delivered in 2017? Is it being used? And then how does that system integrate in parallel with the PCS or the maritime single window concept and Assecutor world? And what is your vision on how Customs sees a PCS and a regulatory single window all coming together to collaborate and interoperate? So it is quite a bit of a question, but Controller, if you can just kick the ball off there with a response.
All right, thank you for the questions. There are many pieces, so I cannot remember all, so I'll ask you as I go on.
Not a problem.
The first thing is that you asked about what about the PCS that was funded by the IDB and was designed.
The electronic single window.
Sorry, the electronic single window, not the PCS.
Yes.
The electronic single window. I think I see Katrina Bradshaw on the call. I think she will be best positioned to answer that question, but I know that the certain developments were made for that system. They had tried to incorporate some of the agencies into the process. And after that, I cannot say much more. I don't know exactly what is happening with that proposal. I know that the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, I think that's the ministry, and small business was dealing with it. So Katrina will best answer that question. What's the next question you have for me?
So more to the discussion that's gone so far is, how do you see Assecutor world? Because while they asked about the single window incorporating with Assecutor world, I think overall there's a question about how Assecutor world can interact with whether it's a port community system, whether it's a maritime single window. And we know that other persons have asked, and I'll ask Mr. Gira as well as Dwayne to sort of come in on their practical experience as to how things have connected. But how do you see Assecutor world, certainly since the improvements that have been made late last year, how do you see the interoperability between Assecutor world and any system that is created?
Yes, and with respect to the port community system in Assecutor world, there's definitely a need for the interoperability between the two systems. There are definitely some processes where, in some cases, Assecutor world will be required to pull information, and in other cases, it will be required to push information to the port community system. And that is because of the link between the port authority, port business and customs business. So there's a very, very important link between the two. And actually, you cannot get the port community system working in any major way without that interaction with Assecutor world. What will have to be worked out between the two agencies will be what will be the information that one system will have to send to the other and vice versa. That would be critical to working out that whole process. And Dwayne, hi Dwayne. Dwayne, you can tell them that is a very in-depth process, to really work out those fine details between how the two systems work. Me and Dwayne would have worked together in Jamaica, and we would have had to sit down and work over time with how to work out those finer details with the pushing and pulling of the information. But overall, it is important for all to know that the two must interface with each other if you're going to eliminate the duplication of processes in the trade process.
Thanks very much, Controller. So I'll ask Dwayne, followed by Warsama, to weigh in, since both of you persons have posed questions with respect to the integration.
Thanks, Andrea. So, yeah, I'm not sure what question I'm answering, but in terms of Assecutor and in terms of UNCTAD, our approach to it was that we were fully aware from the start that customs as was said earlier, would be a key partner in terms of information and in terms of supporting us in terms of process changes. From a strictly IT standpoint, we have various web services that we would have created, and we do exchange quite a lot of information. As I said earlier, one of the key things for us was that customs was on board in terms of accepting the proposal for us to receive the manifest initially, and then to provide it to them. So Asikuda uses a very specific XML format that we are able to translate the manifest to. One of the benefits to the port community that we saw immediately was that a number of the shipping lines who are international players were then able to resort back to their proprietary formats in terms of their manifest information, whether COSCAR, you know, the different EDIFACT standards, and then that they use internationally. So they didn't have to necessarily scope it for Jamaica's use only, because of the fact that we operate as a message broker. So we are able to accept multiple formats and then convert it and send it to customs. Once customs approves that manifest, then we also send that manifest information to the terminals, who are then able to use it to do their planning and other operational activities. From a risk management standpoint, what we had done with UNCTAD and with customs at the time was that we actually had a specific contract through customs in place with UNCTAD to support the PCS activities, because of the fact that UNCTAD, as you can appreciate, is very busy in a number of countries in terms of implementing custom systems. And so what we wanted to do was to have a formal arrangement in place to support the fact that we needed these interfaces developed and to work with us. One of the things that can affect the project, a project like this, a PCS project, is the fact that you have to appreciate that it's different from an internal project within a company, because of the fact that with internal projects, you can manage the resources. With a PCS, whether from custom side or whether from the terminal side, if you have stakeholders who are not in sync in terms of rolling out their interfaces, etc., then it can impact you negatively if you don't manage those risks carefully. So that would be it from our approach, and we still have those meetings. We still have meetings with UNCTAD and with customs. Up to yesterday, we had one. So it's always look at it as a long-term relationship, and then you have to work out the interfaces and the processes going forward.
Thanks very much, Dwayne.
Just to come in there and say that I can support everything that Dwayne said, and there's a big need, huh, for the interaction with customs, with implementing the port community system. And in Jamaica case, where the manifest now goes to the port community system first and then to Asikuda World, I think they had to change the app to accommodate that, correct, Dwayne? But in Barbados' case, where the app requires that manifest is reported to customs first, then if the requirement now is to change that to the PCS first, then you have to make some adjustments to the customs app to make that legal. And all other cases, it's important that there's this link and this discussion, this interaction with customs, because there are a lot of data elements that are shared between the two systems that can be either captured in one system and sent to the other, and vice versa, to avoid duplication. So that too is important. And it might seem simple, it might seem straightforward, but when you get into the workings of it, it calls for a lot of work and a lot of discussion and a lot of understanding. And integrate to that whole process as well will be UNCTAD, who will provide that development work for the interface between UNCTAD and the port community system. So that is something else that you have to take in consideration when you're implementing the system, that UNCTAD will have to play a part in that web service development for the relaying of information between the two systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Controller, for the additional clarification. Rosama?
Yes, The same for our cases. It was not simple at all. We were in discussions with customs for the better part of a year before it was agreed that the manifest should come first to PCS, and PCS would then distribute it or to provide it to customer security system. We've been working on that since April this year. UNCTAD has basically provided an expert for the development of the interface between PCS and customer security system. It was in a good time basically because custom was in the process of moving or upgrading to the latest version of Secure the World, and we made it as part of their basically the task to be completed. They have developed the interface, and basically we have also developed from our side. We are currently in pilot testing in UAT. We hope to release it in mid-November, basically next month, to select a few shipping agents. And it was agreed that in the pilot phase, all access will be removed from those specific shipping agents to submit it directly to customer secure the world, and they will have to submit it to PCS only, and PCS will provide it to customs. When it comes to the integration format also, Secure the World has its own XML format when it comes to manifest submission. So to make it easier, we have adopted this this format, UNCTAD basically XML format for manifest, and PCS is able to consume that file. And before that, it was very difficult also for the shipping agent because they had to submit it to PCS and also have to submit it to customs. So instead of submitting twice, they'll be able to submit it only once for basically submission of manifest. And the other issue we've had was that once they submitted through PCS, we had problems with synchronization because the port used to receive the manifest as well, but the shipping agents, if there is any corrections to be made, they normally only correct on a security system, and the ports has no way of knowing basically has it been corrected or not. So it was one of the primary objectives to integrate these two platforms to provide a better services for the shipping agents.
Thanks very much for that clarification, Sam. I think that's very useful. They may just beg your indulgence. The project that the Caribbean Bank is supporting the Barbados Port Incorporated with is in fact a system, and a good portion of that is really going to be looking at how we deal with the interagency coordination, as well as doing all of the diagnostics to understand the status of the legislation, as well as engagements to kind of work out what that PCS model needs to look like. So I think that this is a very good sensitization session to start asking some of the questions that will need to be resolved during the design and implementation. So a question coming from the Barbados Port team, the question of cost and who pays for the PCS. So for both Jamaica and Jabilty, what models have you employed or are you intending to employ to ensure sustainability of the PCS? I'll ask Warsama to lead off this time.
So when it comes to cost, this is basically a subject that the users are very sensitive to, and especially when you first start rolling out the services, the first question on the users' lips are like, how much is it going to be? At the beginning, it was provided for free for the shipping agents for like a year, and afterwards, once they got used to it and it was clear for them, and it was also for us from our side to give us the chance to assess the value of the system itself, because the value of the system is different from area to area, from region to region. It has to be specifically priced to the needs or to the region itself. So once we provided the system for a year, and basically we had made a lot of the submissions, especially the regulatory submission like manifest and loading list and loading list, the file forms, all these different submissions are basically mandatory for the shipping agents to submit, and they are approved by the port authority. So if they do not submit it, they have to pay a fine of $300 per submission, per document they missed. So it's easier for them to use the system. And so for these specific regulatory submissions or documentations, we had to make it free, since we said it was mandatory. What we are charging for is the services, basically 24/7 services. We help in the submission format, different submission format acceptable through the PCS, and integration with the shipping agent systems are chargeable. What else? Training was provided free at the beginning, but now it's a system that they have to use it, and past the first few months, if they require extra training, or if they have acquired new staff or new resources that they need training for, training has a specific price. So these how basically we charge for the services. And also for the shipping agents, they like I've said, they have two options. They have the standard basically option, where it's free, only the limited and free services are provided, and they have the premium services, where they have a lot of extra help, they have extra user accounts and these type of things. So we had to be very careful about that, and basically customize it to the needs of the users for the payments of fees. Now we have been providing for free services for free for forwarders. We are due to start charging in the next couple of months for forwarders as well. Forwarders, we have decided to provide instead of subscription fees like the shipping agents, they will have to pay transaction fees, because they've been using now for 8 months for the forwarding services. So they got used to it a lot more, basically, and a lot of them are ready to pay for the services if we decide to make it payable. So the strategy is that you either go through the system and basically get all your port fees invoices, port fee port documentation processing online, book your slot online, or you can go to the ports and get your slots there, or pay, go to the port cashier office and pay for your invoices there. And at this point in time, this is something that nobody is ready to do, and this is how we plan to charge for those forwarding services as well. And then you have finally the tracking services. The tracking services are our biggest, the market that we are looking at is Ethiopia. There's a lot more users there, and they have basically all their 85% of their goods coming through Djibouti. So for tracking services, it's payable in their local currency, and we are due to start that in the coming year in January. And we have in the meantime provided them the services for free as well.
Thanks very much, Wassam. Dwayne?
Thanks, Andrew. So in terms of our commercial model, what the Port Authority decided when we started the project was that we would provide upfront financing for the project, de-risk the project, and then once that was done, we would then start to charge the port community. So we made changes to our legislation to support a PCS tariff fee. And what we will be doing, we haven't started as yet, but what we will be doing once we start is that we looked at different models throughout the world. In certain countries, what you have to do is that you have to look at, in terms of your environment, the type of cargo, the type of transactions, etc., and then create a business model or a commercial model for that. In Jamaica, we have a revenue neutral model. And then what we have done is that we have decided to charge one flat fee based on commercial transactions. Commercial transactions are defined by customs typically to be 5,000 US and over CIF, and also to charge a flat fee to the terminals per year. So those would be the two main areas in terms of how we would be financing the project once we start to charge. But ultimately what we wanted to do was to implement the project, show the persons the value of the services that they're getting, and then implement the charges. This component is a very critical component because, as I said earlier, it does take capital to acquire and to implement. You have to have dedicated resources, etc. And then in terms of the ongoing costs as it relates to the maintaining of the infrastructure, etc. So you have to, once you're undertaking the project, really think about the capital needs and the financing of the project going forward.
Thank you. I will give Warsama and Dwayne a brief break and ask a question to Port. If we take Jamaica as an example of a PCS in the region, we have a country with 5 seaports and 3 airports. As far as I know, 3 of the seaports are part of the PCS and the airports are not. There is 1 seaport and 1 airport in Barbados. If a PCS is implemented in Barbados, would it include the airport, although there is no single authority at the airport controlling the delivery of cargo?
So the short answer to that, colleagues, is that in the first phase of this project, our focus is to look at the movements of cargo through the Port of Bridgetown. So certainly in the first phase, we will be focusing on the seaport arrangement. But we will establish the network and interface with the national single window. So I believe that that will be something that will be evaluated at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. So then going back again to Warsama and Dwayne, given our current COVID climate, how have Jamaica and Jabilty PCS dealt with the issue of cybersecurity? So I'll start with Dwayne this time.
Thanks, Andrea. So one of the key things that we had identified before we even started the project was to ensure that from a security standpoint, from a cybersecurity standpoint, the information that we have should be very secure. We should only, from a user level standpoint, allow users to access information that they need to access. And so what we did was that, as I said, I think, and I can be corrected, but I think our port community system is one of the first to have been implemented in a cloud-based environment. Microsoft Azure is a partner in the project in terms of that. We have spent and dedicated a lot of resources in terms of the processes and the acquisition of varying software to protect the environment. And so that is an ongoing activity for us. Within the PCS operator itself, we have a dedicated network and security specialist. We also work with our vendors and with Microsoft in terms of looking at all of the emerging risks as it relates to cybersecurity, and to ensure that we have the proper mechanisms in place. The Port Authority itself also has engaged in recent times varying consultants who operate within the port cybersecurity space to do a risk assessment, and based on that, then we would have also had action items that would have been actioning. So risk management, even before COVID, is something that we take very seriously. Any port community system player, you really need to invest. We would have seen what is happening with the different certain shipping lines and certain other players that would have been exposed in recent times. And that's something that we take very seriously.
Thank you. Warsama?
Yes, for cybersecurity, we take it very seriously as well. It's like we dedicate around 8% of the budget towards cybersecurity. We have different periodical audits, penetration testing, working with teams and companies around the world that try to basically improve our security it's like continually. When it comes to cybersecurity, it's like you can never know for sure. You can only do your best. So and the best you can do is like to remain as paranoid as possible and try to improve and spend on it to improve the security. So when it comes to user level security, there is a lot of basically there is the what you call HTTPS and all these different mechanisms, password security, and a lot of them are having difficulties using the system because of the password security, like 3 tries and the system blocks you. And this is one of the main things that our help desk is dealing with every single day. We have like 50 or more calls asking us to reset their password because they basically they have been tried to use it, and 3 tries the system has blocked them. So captchas, we use captchas for all the searches in our website, and so we take it very seriously. So this is something that is very important as we are dealing with also with government data when it comes to the port, and so that's it basically.
Thanks very much for that. So Dwayne, you mentioned the integration and authorization for government agencies. The question is, can you expand on that component?
Well, I'm trying to remember what context I had mentioned it in, but the thing with it is that, just to be clear, our port community system now does not integrate with the border. I'm assuming it's the border and regulatory agencies that the person would be asking about. We integrate fully with Asikuda World, and what it is that a part of the customs release in Jamaica that we get is that we only receive customs releases once the 2 components are signed off on, which is that customs has signed off on their component, and also all of the border and regulatory agencies in terms of their risk assessment would have been completed. So that is it in terms of the other regulatory agencies. Customs itself, through the electronic single window project, would then be interfacing with those other regulatory agencies to build their capacity, one in terms of rolling out the single window, in terms of the license permits, re-engineering processes, etc., certificates of origin, etc., and also to implement, certain best practices in terms of using HS codes throughout the regulatory agencies, etc. What we've seen in most countries is that there's no perfect time to start, and so you really have to just invest in the various areas. A lot of the regulatory agencies would not have funding or human resource, etc., but you really need to use the technology and then to re-engineer and to bring them on board in terms of where you're going. In most countries, either the Port Authority or Jamaica or the customs itself is usually ahead or leading the pack in terms of the technology, in terms of new initiatives. And so you have to find, strategic and innovative ways to ensure that all of the various stakeholders are on board also and playing their part.
Thank you. Final question for you, Dwayne. Are you using the IMO file convention as the data sets for your documents? And when you move to the air community, are there lots of intermodal data exchanges between the sea and air cargo within your PCS?
Sure, thanks. So no, currently right now, I'm not. No, currently right now. So let me backtrack. As part of our project, we have a file forms module that we haven't started as yet. In Jamaica, file forms or the IMO file forms fall under the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, which is a different entity legally from the Port Authority. We've been having discussions with them, and they're doing some preparatory work in terms of for Jamaica to ascend to that. From a technological standpoint, we'll be working with them and we'll be implementing the use of file forms. Currently, right now, we're not using those standards right now. So through that module, then we'll be implementing covering very specific file forms. The second question is sorry, I'm having a senior moment. You had asked about
That's okay. It's a lot of a question. When you move to when you look at the air community, is there a lot of exchange between sea and air cargo?
No.
In terms of data.
In terms of data, I'm not seeing currently right now a lot of movement between sea and air. I wouldn't say a lot, to be honest. There are instances where persons do bring in cargo and move it, but it's typically in terms of ship spares and parts, etc., and certain other, small items. But in terms of volume, no, I wouldn't say that you have a lot of intermodal exchange between both air and sea at this point in time.
Thank you, Dwayne. And so the final question, which is a bit of a double-edged sword, but I'm throwing it out to the panel, and I would imagine that the Barbados Port Incorporated would wish to weigh in, as well as controller who's on the line. Barbados has no single window, no trade portal, no airport authority responsible for cargo. Assecutor World has very limited single window capability. Customs has no website except the Assecutor website. The port was already leap years ahead with their technology, web services, etc. Does the panel think that resources are better spent at this time on a PCS, or should we get other agencies and services up to the port's level? So I don't even know if the panel really wants to touch that, but it is the question that is on the floor. So whichever brave soul wishes to weigh in. I think that when it comes to technology rollout and technology that requires interagency coordination, it is a mammoth undertaking. I don't think necessarily that we can afford a chicken and egg conversation, because the competitiveness of the environment is such that everybody has to get on board, and you have to start somewhere. I think Customs has made huge advances during the course of last year and continues to do so. Katrina is on the line, so now might be a good time for Katrina to say where we are with respect to plans for the electronic single window. And I also think it's important to stress that the trading community can't afford to wait for all ducks to be lined up. I think that perhaps is, and I think all countries have kind of experienced that kind of scenario and having to work on things in parallel. Certainly Jamaica has had to work on things in parallel. So maybe Katrina, if you could just weigh in to say where we are with the electronic single window, I think that will at least provide some comfort that there are other improvements that are taking place. And certainly the controller can weigh in with the overall program that Customs itself has embarked on to improve the services to the trading community. Katrina?
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Good morning, panel, and good morning to everyone joining the webinar. Just to update as to the progress with the implementation of the electronic single window, I take note of the question that was posed earlier on the past project that had ended in 2017. When the project was handed over to the government of Barbados, After that project concluded, it was inoperable. Subsequently, the government was considering proposals, and out of that process, the government has recently approved the awarding of the operationalization of the electronic single window to UNTAD, where Barbados will be using the Asukuta World as a platform to push forward the electronic single window. So, with that decision, we are moving forward, and we'll be having engagements we're looking forward to having engagements with UNTAD on the way forward and how we roll out the electronic single window, and have those discussions with the relevant agencies, including Customs. As we heard, I recognize that Customs is a critical stakeholder to the whole process, to how we can work together and have a good system that is suited to Barbados' needs. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks, Katrina. Controller?
Yes, thank you. I'll weigh in on the part there about the technology and the lag from the other government agencies. And yes, you're correct. The other government agencies often, in most countries, lag behind Customs with respect to technology. But the electronic single window will solve that issue. What will happen is that the electronic single window will cater to all of those border-related activities that those other agencies conduct, and they will be captured in the ESW, and therefore, at that point there'll be some technological update for the respective agencies to ensure that they have the necessary technology to interact with the electronic single window. What we're doing now in the Asukuta World is that we have brought the agencies on board with the view of clearing the shipments in Asukuta World. And that is used as a benchmark for the ESW, because when the ESW is implemented, then those activities that are currently done in Asukuta World will be handed over to the functionalities of the ESW. So what is doing now is that we are fine-tuning those processes so that it will be actually a drop-in into the electronic single window, so that they can process the activities through the single window. So I see the single window as a facility to upgrading the border agencies' technology and to bring them in line with port and with Customs in the whole development of technology for the processing of imported goods.
Sorry, I was muted. So I'm going to take some license here and throw this question out to either Hans or Richard. You guys sit in a very big picture sort of environment, and I'd like to get your perspective, certainly from information that you've gathered from your membership. What really are some of the movements of the needle, so to speak, that you've been able to see as ports move towards these PCS setups? And also, is the PCS a fait accompli, or is it something that we should prepare to be constantly evolving and building out to respond to trading needs?
Thank you, Andrea. I think Dwayne and Wasama have shown very ably in terms of the benefits that the port community systems have. The key take from that is it's about the community. Going back to the previous question, yes, some of the other authorities, not just in Barbados, but around the world, even in some of the more advanced areas such as Germany, some of the authorities don't have electronic systems. So actually the PCS is an enabler for those authorities to move into the digital world. And so actually where you're looking in terms of an international perspective, that's the key to it. I think you have to work together as a community, not just at a local level, but at an international level. And that There are common examples of challenges. Asikuda, Jamaica, Jabilty have the same challenges and have successfully moved them forwards that Barbados has with working through Asikuda. So I think as a whole, it's about making sure that the PCS is not seen just as another IT solution, but as integral to everything that is happening in trade, and use it as such. And I'm sure Hans has a couple of wise words to follow as well. And you're on mute, Hans.
Yeah.
If I unmute, it works, isn't it? Yes, but it's always very difficult to say. I hear a lot of things which come into my ears as common things. The problems that Owen mentioned from a customer point of view, how, what, when. Am I still in control? Yes, of course you're still in control, because you're the controller actually. And all those aspects have to be addressed somewhere. And as Richard said, and we know Asikuda, we know the people at UNTAD, I think it's good that also customs from, let's say, Djibouti, that are fully incorporated in the PCS from Djibouti, that they might be able to communicate with the customs at Barbados to share their views, to share their experience, and to see how happy and the good things, and of course also the lessons learned to get it done. That's what I want to add. And of course I have heard a lot of, I've seen all the questions down there. I see also the pain points, I see some possible things, but at the end, I think that when Barbados is able to start up the, let's say, the development of the PCS, including the single window, that first step is like babies, crawling, stepping, falling, step up again, and run at a certain moment. That's the way to go. And I hope that you can start up let's say, the preparing of the PCS within Barbados very soon. And we are, well, we are very happy to assist you wherever we can with our experience globally, and to have handshake between the various ports that use Asikuda, that use airport and seaport environments together in their developments, and also in their let's say, their logistic flows, and to make it work for you, not only leaving you on the aisle and in the town of Bridgetown, but just to help you and assist you in cross-border and port-to-port exchange as well. That's what we aim for, and I will be very happy to see the progress in the coming months and early next year with a big smile on my face.
Great, thank you so much for that. And now it's all left for me to turn over to Ken Adderley, Advisor for Port Operations and Projects at BPI, to deliver the closing remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. To our port facilitation colleagues, this has been a really engaging morning. Firstly, I would like to thank our sponsors, the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, as well as the International Port Community System Association and the Barbados Port Inc. I'd also like to thank the Permanent Secretary, Ms. Sonia Foster, from the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, the Controller of Customs, Mr. Owen Holder, as well as Chairman of the IPCSA, Mr. Hans Rook, for their opening remarks. One of the key takeaways for me, and certainly for us, is that through collaboration, we can achieve anything that we set out to do. And this point was underscored particularly in the remarks by the Controller of Customs, Mr. Owen Holder. I also wish to thank our eminent list of presenters, Mr. Richard Morton from the IPCSA, Mr. Wasama Gurer from Jabilty Ports, as well as Mr. Dwayne Powell from Jamaica PCS, for sharing their knowledge and experiences with us. I believe that these lessons and the presentations would provide useful guidelines for us as Barbados rolls out our plans to implement PCS and single window. To our moderator, Andrea, you've been great this morning. You've been a wonderful host. You kept things smooth. You kept the energy going. We want to thank you and the Caribbean Development Bank for your support as we seek to implement a port community system in Barbados using technology and innovative solutions as a means to improve our trade conditions in Barbados. I also wish to thank the project team as well as the business communication team at the port for coordinating. This is what we're calling the first in a series of activities aimed at sensitizing Barbados stakeholders on the importance and benefits to be derived not only to the port, but nationally as it relates to doing business in Barbados. Finally, we've had 80 plus participants today, and I want to thank all of you for joining us from Barbados, from the private sector, from the public sector, as well as regional and international participants. Thank you for joining today. Thank you for the stimulating discussion that we've had. We look forward for having continued sessions like this, and we trust that you would have had an enjoyable meeting. Thank you, and have an enjoyable rest of the day.
Thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Have a great weekend.